The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
I'm James McComb, reporting live from home in my bathrobe and slippers. Tonight, we're talking Duncan Polar Peppermint Coffee. Gene's here with the latest. Gene, do you copy?
The home with Duncan is where you want to be.
Nau mai, hoki mai ki Atherfold, e mihi nei ko Duncan Greive tōku ingoa. This is a monopod. I haven't done one of these in a while, but I sort of felt like doing it. I felt like kind of getting some things which have been sitting in me for a while off my chest. I'm recording this on a rainy Friday morning, and I'm doing it early because I fly out on a junket on Sunday. Haven't been on one of those in a while either. You know, you could, if I was trying to be kind of glass half full about reality right now, I'd sort of say the fact of New Zealand corporate flying some journalists overseas to see some stuff. Maybe that's one of these kind of green shirts that everyone's kind of just frantically looking out for at the moment. Maybe, but I'm seeing a lot less of those, and that's certainly not the subject of this podcast today. I want to reflect on some things that I've been thinking about for a little while. So last night I was at an event at Mantels in Mount Eden, gorgeous venue. People should use it more. It has this kind of almost you could be in Italy is the feel of Mantels. Incredible food. Amazing wine. There was just like free-flowing Laurent Perrier. Again, is that a green shoot? I don't know. And it was actually it was great to see a bunch of people from, the PR and, media buying, advertising, TV production, those kind of scenes, who you used to see a lot, because there used to be events like this all the time. And I'm struggling to think of the last one that I went to, and that feels like it's instructive about what this year has been like from a media perspective. This industry, in the broad sense, in the sense that I try to talk about it on this podcast, it is a very kind of people and relationship driven thing, and it runs on some level. It runs off having new exciting things to launch and talk about, and getting people together with some nice food and wine. Someone gets up on stage, they bring some stars out, they tell a particular story about where they're going, and they try and get some advertisers excited to join them with that. That's kind of how it goes. That's particularly true of this specific time of year. There's events, which again I think I've talked about on this podcast, called upfronts, which are they happen around the world, and they're where media companies, particularly TV companies, but now everyone does them in large markets. They get together and they talk about their new shows they've got coming, shows they've got returning. They wheel out stars, and they try and get people to make big ad bookings. And it was an early warning marker last year when WBD and 3 didn't have an upfronts, and that was a shocking thing for me, because there's such a big set piece of the TV year is announcing what you're doing next year, and the fact of not having one felt like it was really instructive that something wasn't quite right there. And I spent a couple of months trying to figure out what that was, and obviously, I think by then we already knew that the project was going off air, but then the big neutron bomb that was the closure of News Hub arrived a couple of months later. Now, TVNZ did have upfronts. They had quite extravagant ones. They were at Spark Arena. There were people walking around in dresses made out of champagne flutes. It was maybe the last time when TVNZ thought that it was somehow immune to the environment that was seemingly impacting other media. This year haven't heard about any TVNZ upfronts. And that is even crazy because they have always been the biggest show in town. You know, the budgets for these things are easily into the six figures, if not much more, because you could reliably expect that you'd get a return on that investment, which was people buying huge chunks of advertising space well into the future. Now, I'm not saying that they'll never come back for either company, but TVNZ right now is proposing the loss of 50 jobs. So even though there is a good economic argument for it having an upfront, it can't do it right now. The optics are just too awful when you're trying to figure out how to save $30 million, even if you think that you might make, you know, some outsized return on the investment, and you think that by not having upfronts, it's such a profoundly negative thing to say about your company. You just can't do it at a time like this. So last night, I actually went along thinking that this was the WBD upfronts. I'm being invited to an event by Warner Brothers Discovery in November. That's what it is. It wasn't. What it was an announcement of the sort of renewal and expansion of a partnership between Warner Brothers Discovery and NBC Universal. Now, these are two massive American media companies that sell into this market. You know, WBD is has the public-facing 3 brand, which has a 35-year history, and we all know what that is. NBC Universal is more of a wholesaler into the market. It operates with the Bravo channel most prominently. Fantastic, really well-defined slate of reality TV shows. And again, I don't want to fault this event. I was so happy to be there. I would love to be invited back if you're listening, people at WBD. It was beautifully staged. You had Don Bowden interviewing Chris Taylor, who's the head of NBC Universal for Australia and New Zealand, and Juliet Peterson, who's taken over from my frequent fold co-host Glenn Kine at Warner Brothers Discovery. And they spoke, you know, really well about their sort of future plans. So it wasn't an upfront, but it was a little bit. But mainly it was an event to talk about the expansion of Bravo and how well Bravo is doing in the local market. They say that it's up, I think they were saying 34% year on year in terms of its performance. Bravo has got a real cult following. I mean, I'm not sure whether, you know, to what extent listeners to this podcast are also viewers of its content. Some of them will be, would guess a majority aren't, but they do a specific thing incredibly well. And, you know, they were talking about how they're leaning into that. So I think next year they're going to have these Bravo blocks, showing some Bravo shows in the afternoon and in the evening on 3, as well as amping up the channel and launching a free ad-supported version of Bravo, a fast channel, which are these new, basically they look like a linear channel in some respects. You just hit play and there's a show playing. This will be a pure below deck universe, unbelievably good reality show. And they had Aisha Scott, the New Zealander, who's become one of the emblematic stars of that franchise. It's just an absolute natural born kinetic TV talent. Told the funniest, most lewd story on stage, and just, you know, it's just so exhilarating being the presence of like proper TV talent. They've got a thing that ordinary people don't. So look, it was a great event, but it was also an event that was just so instructive about the fact that the big show was, we're going to be bringing more of this imported reality TV to New Zealand. And Juliet did make mention of, you know, there's a new Guy Williams show next year. There's a new Jono Pryor of Jono and Ben fame comedy coming. But they were almost in passing, you know. The only local programming on 3 is New Zealand On Air funded, and it's going to be a tiny proportion of what they show. And it did feel quite instructive that where in the past at events like this it would have been Kanua Lloyd or Paul Henry or Paddy Gower or, you know, this whole galaxy of people who are part of the furniture at that network, they just don't work there anymore. I mean, Paul Henry was there, but he had no official role. So the star was a New Zealander, but a New Zealander whose main work is for a big international network. So again, this isn't about the event. I cannot stress enough that I had an excellent time. I had great wine. I caught up with a bunch of people who I really like, but I just want to kind of convey a bit of the mood there. Like, I spoke to someone who I really, really, really respect, who runs one of the big production companies here. And both of us were just kind of sad because it feels like, absent some big change, we are living in the twilight of having an institutional media, the two branches of it being news media and kind of culture and entertainment media, the sort of pop culture of it, if you will. That is just, it's just kind of fading out right now. And, we're just, we're seeing, if you just look at, like last year I wrote this piece which wrapped up a whole bunch of bad news in media, and it was very well read, and a lot of people were like, man, that's a lot of stuff. This year's would be so much worse, because, you've seen news hubs shut down, you've seen Penguin kind of massively shrinking its local offices within books. You're seeing TVNZ, on its second round of big cuts for the year. NZME just yesterday announced it was shutting 14 community papers. That's 14 papers which have been around for decades in small towns, and it resulted in 30 job losses. So that tells you just how thin they'd got. But that's still a journalist in every one of those towns who was writing about what was going on in those towns. But anyway, so the warning lights are just flashing so loud and clear everywhere right now. So this friend who works at this big production company was just talking about the fact that the news media is talking so much, and I'm so guilty of it, about the cuts to news and to journalism. And, that's understandable, right? These are hundreds of jobs that have leaked out this year. And yet the production sector, which is making shows for New Zealanders to watch on New Zealand channels or New Zealand streaming services, that's got just as big a crisis that's going on, because both TVNZ and 3, the biggest commissioners of local content, they have almost come to a dead halt on that. They're, New Zealand TV, there's a bunch of it that's funded by New Zealand On Air. There's also a bunch of it that was commercially funded. You could sell enough ads against it to recoup that. And so it's a lot of reality shows fit into that bucket. A show like The Traders, a show like The Block, and almost all of that has come to a halt because there just isn't a good reason to think that you can sell enough advertising against it to recoup the cost of a show like The Traders might cost $3 million or more. And Stuart Simon-Lunn made a very strong case for it as season 2 of The Traders being the best TV show we've ever made. I don't believe it, but some smart people think it has a pretty strong case. He's not the only one. That kind of thing, it's just going away. And it's okay for things to go away if you have a good reason to think they'll return. We know that we're in a triple dip recession. We know that there was this kind of blast of austerity through the public sector, which also went through, media spend and ad budgets for government departments. It's all connected to the high interest rates. All this stuff is, we know what is going on there. The thing that's scary, that's new, is that you have to have a reason to believe something will change when the economy recovers, that this will all come roaring back. And I don't know many people who have that belief. And this business, like any business, runs on hope. It runs on a reasonably held belief that if you can make the right bet, the right investment, get the right talent, line them up in the right way, that you can kind of win. And that's just getting harder to kind of understand. The thing that's sad is some of it is audience decline, particularly across television. But speaking for the spin-off, our audience has been incredibly consistent all year. So the decline is actually largely in advertising spend, and it's just a shift, a massive secular shift of budgets to places which generate no New Zealand content. And I'm talking about YouTube and Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc. Now look, these places can do what they want. If you talk to people in marketing or in media, they just say they go where the audiences are. I don't think that's strictly true, because the scale of the loss of advertising revenue is massively outpacing the scale of audience decline. That's just a fact. Now, some of it is just budgets being cut. You've got massive clients like Spark who have historically been just really consistent spenders across all forms of media, who are, they're going through massive challenges right now. Their share price is off 40% this year. They are also grappling with a bit of an existential crisis. So this stuff is all connected. I guess the thing that's giving me pause is this idea that, you have, like I said, you have to have a sincere, well-founded belief that things will come back. And I just don't know many people who have that belief right now. And that's largely because if the economy comes roaring back, do the gains just go to large technology platforms? That's kind of what it feels like right now. And so we're just on the precipice of quite an interesting, I think, globally significant experiment, potentially, where the amount of institutional media, culture and entertainment and journalism that we have shrinks to a quite radical degree, and we become a place for user-generated content and really a version of what we saw last night, which was a great event with awesome people on the ground, almost entirely about selling ads against imported content. And that's just a really different world for us, as a country, to not have some culture that is viewed by and available to everybody, rather than algorithmically delivered according to a vast array of different signals that are given on various channels, and largely content that comes from anywhere in the world. You just start to lose that thing that ties you together as a country. And it's just a really interesting place to sort of imagine yourself without a kind of an agreed set of facts generated by journalism and a widely understood sense of your national culture generated by the likes of TV productions.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. The holidays are here, and you know what that means? It's time to get your friends and family the gifts they deserve. Take the stress out of shopping with Amazon's great deals and low prices on a huge range of items, from toys to tech and much more. Whoever you're gifting for, Amazon has great prices on everything you need this holiday season. Shop Black Friday week starting November 21st.
This is the sound of your ride home with Dad after he caught you vaping. Awkward, isn't it? Most vapes contain seriously addictive levels of nicotine and disappointment. Know the real cost of vapes. Brought to you by the FDA.
His code name's Jackal. He's an exceptional assassin.
Streaming now on Peacock.
He will kill again, unless we stop him.
Academy Award winner Eddie Redmayne.
You're paying me to kill him. I am charging you for getting away.
The Jackal's here. Look at the exits.
BAFTA Award winner Lashana Lynch.
I will find him, and I will kill him myself.
I like to win.
So do I.
The Day of the Jackal. Streaming now, only on Peacock.
Now, there is an argument against this. I'm not going to ignore the fact that user-generated content has massive cultural properties of its own, that we have, our own versions of, independent podcasts that have become really popular, and I think shows like The Morning Shift, which have just kind of come out of nowhere to achieve a huge amount of salience and cut-through. These do a lot of what things like radio did in the past. I mean, there's a real direct connection there with that show. But there's just a there's a sort of a volume thing and there's a monetization thing that is absent. And, you know, the shuttering of those 14 community newspapers came the day after Shane Curry reported for NZ Herald that the Fair Digital News Bargaining Bill, which was about to be passed, had sort of vanished from the queue that it was in. There is no kind of clear signal about what's going on there. You know, I personally am in favour of a pause and think about whether that is the best form of that legislation. To maybe you can achieve those ends by another means. Australia seems to be looking at moving away from it, and given that we were trying to align with them, that makes sense. But we don't know that yet, and in some ways the closure of those newspapers felt like NZME signalling, well, these are the stakes in this absolutely kind of brutal way that unless there is a certainty about what is going to replace it and that it comes very quickly, that, you know, you're going to see more things like this. And, you know, that goes across culture and productions. You know, all of the shows that were, you know, naturally announced this kind of time of year, the Great Kiwi Bake Off, Celebrity Treasure Island. I don't know anyone who is confident that all those things are coming back next year. And that, you know, that starts to make the lives of working comedians uneconomic. You know, I spoke to one a couple of weeks ago contemplating moving to Australia. This whole thing, this whole kind of culture that we have is really close to the wall right now. And, you know, it's quite a tricky situation. And I think the thing that I find really troubling when it comes to this government, and look, they've been in a year, they've got a whole bunch of stuff to do, they've got a very chaotic environment that they're operating in with two kind of quite misaligned coalition partners in some respect. So I'm not, and there wasn't really a great program of work to pick up and run with from the previous government either. But it is just quite telling to me that there are things that are being done by serious people in other countries that start to address some of the underlying causes of this. You know, I'm just going to throw out a couple of examples. You know, like in Australia, they're considering fines of up to $50 million for where scams can be proven to have originated on a large digital platform. Now, yesterday I published a cover story just talking about the sheer volume of scams which originate on Meta's products, particularly WhatsApp and Facebook, especially Facebook. You know, Singapore, which has really detailed reporting of this, puts that number at 50% through Meta's products alone. You know, that we've all seen, and Dylan Reeves done great reporting on this, just this sheer proliferation of scam ads which use the IP of celebrities and of local news sites to basically warn pensioners largely of attacks on their retirement savings. And they're basically a way of opening up a kind of a crypto scam. And right now, the banks are under huge pressure to fix that in New Zealand. They're having to make massive investments into it. And this is a direct quote from the CEOs of the major banks, doing literally nothing, absolutely nothing in terms of engaging with them to try and fix the flow of scams in. It's just the outflowing kind of consequences that we're dealing with. And it just seems kind of shocking to me that this is, you know, probably the second biggest ad platform in the country now that is just running constant, always-on advertising for criminal activity. And we don't have any kind of response from government. Like, literally, there is no system of fines. Like, the Commerce Commission last week, yesterday as I record this, announced criminal charges against 1NZ for what is at best a mildly misleading ad. At best, it's mildly misleading about the nature of its coverage with its cell coverage associated with its SpaceX satellite system. Like, what is going on where our Commerce Commission is taking charges against like a big institutional part of our furniture that is 1NZ, but is just sitting there like looking at Facebook and going, well, nothing can be done about the fact that they've got just a significant chunk of revenue that is criminals trying to steal money from people. And the government spends like millions of dollars every year with those platforms and does nothing about it. So Australia is putting in place this fine system. In Singapore, they're saying, anyone who's selling anything on Facebook Marketplace has to have their identity verified. Malaysia, Malaysia's a sort of semi-authoritarian regime at times, not the most perfect democracy, but they're just doing annual licensing for any large platform with 8 million or more users, and basically saying, look, the extent of the cyberbullying and the scamming that's happening on these platforms means that you're going to, once a year, just have to kind of reapply for your license. And if you don't meet these standards, you just don't get to operate here. In Australia, there's huge conversations about a Netflix quota. Netflix is spending a lot of money making shows in Australia for Australians. They're doing nothing of the sort in New Zealand. Every large technology platform that operates here does so with almost no regulation, with no minister in charge, with no serious attempt to deal with the externalities of them in a way that every other serious country is a long way down the track of. And even if you just think, oh, well, that's just the market, like this is just consumer preferences, which I just don't think it is. Like we know that they're offering kind of huge rebates to and incentive schemes to media companies to meet particular targets, which is part of why advertising spend is moving there so fast. But even discounting that, like it just seems kind of like if you're the Minister of Revenue and you're sitting there going, well, we used to have $10 million that went into a local industry. It employed a bunch of people. It generated PAYE revenue, a GST. It just circulated in our economy. The velocity of money was very fast. Or that money just goes into a Meta account and just goes poof, straight out of the country. No PAYE, no company tax, just the tiniest amount of company tax. We know that all of our social services are crumbling. We know we've got a revenue problem coming at us with the cost of superannuation, healthcare, and so on. So the fact that there's just no attempt to grapple with the fact that these companies are operating here in ways that are profoundly destructive to our tax base, it's just, I don't know, man. It's not very serious country vibes. And yeah, I'm really attached to journalism, and I'm really attached to local productions and the pop culture this country makes. So I've got a dog in this hunt in so many ways. But it doesn't feel like a particularly complex argument to me. And the thing is, when it's gone, it's gone. Like you don't get to rebuild things. Like News Hub isn't coming back. The vast majority of those journalists don't work in journalism anymore. And unless something is done, some like serious, not kind of populist kind of browbeating of social media companies, like I'm not advocating for a ban. I'm just advocating for let's just kind of think about how they interact with society and with culture and with journalism, and whether there is a better way to engage with this than the current no-touch regulation. I mean, Facebook's 21 years old now. Like, it's not a new thing. We've known about how it was operating for a long, long time, and there's still just a massive unseriousness with the way that we go about it, and the consequences are just hurtling at us. They're all around us now. We're living in that world. Anyway, that's just something that I've been thinking about a while. I appreciate, if you stuck around this long, I appreciate you listening to it. And, if it gives you any kind of cause to reflect, or if you've got anything you think I've got wrong or that you agree with, get in touch with me. I'm Duncan at thespinoff.co.nz. As you hear this, I'm overseas, but I'll be back next week to do a more normal Tuesday edition of The Fold, where we just discuss and analyse the news. But until then, I want to thank Aotearoa for recording me, and ka kite anō.
Does your brand have something important to say through meaningful messaging that reaches the right audience? At The Spin-Off, we work closely with our partners to create bespoke campaigns that bring value to both your brand and our audience. If you're interested in learning more about partnering with us, email Beck, that's BEC, at thespinoff.co.nz.
Right now on The Spin-Off, a new cover story. Inside the urgent race to solve homelessness in Aotearoa. Some stories can't be told in 280 characters. Support The Spin-Off's long-form journalism and donate today at thespinoff.co.nz/members.
The Spin-Off Podcast Network.